Tonight is June 24th at 7:01 p.m. I will call the meeting of the Maynard Town Finance to order. And as a preliminary matter, this is Jillian Prendergast. I am currently the chair of the Finance Committee. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Linda?
Yes.
Peter?
Yep.
Katie?
Yes.
Nathan? I saw you say yes, but you're on mute.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Great, thank you.
And
So good evening.
Volunteer to take notes. I think you did, Linda, last time, so I can this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So good evening. This is an open meeting of the Maynard Finance Committee. It is being conducted via Zoom. Speakers on the agenda will be participating remotely, and the chair may allow for the public to provide comment. Please note that while an option for remote meeting attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, this meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast to individual attendees unless otherwise required by law. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, so please take care not to screen share your computer or to share anything with your camera. Anything that you broadcast will be captured by the meeting recording. This meeting is being recorded and will later be posted to the WAVM YouTube channel. For board docs, all the meeting materials can be found on board docs, except as otherwise noted, and that includes basically everything on the meeting tonight. And we will now turn to the agenda because I think we don't have public comment tonight. It is always welcome, but it is not a public hearing. Yeah. So the first item on our agenda tonight is talking about it's not a tri-board meeting, it was like a quad board meeting. So our June 11th meeting. Yeah, so the multi-board meeting debrief and discussion. So I did circulate some material around that also included the materials that the Capcom presented. So I did want to share with the committee, I went, before the agenda was released, I did go to the select board meeting where they talked about the preliminary agenda. And it was much different than what we talked about in our last meeting. So I envisioned that this was going to be a meeting that focused on the capital needs of the town and sort of some upcoming things for, you know, the town and also maybe like the school. And that we were going to talk about those capital needs and prioritize them in this meeting. But that is not what Chris had in mind. And it sort of ended up being a little bit more like the February budget meeting where every board sort of gives a little update. And that wasn't what I was expecting. So that's why there was no presentation on our side. So I did want to share that with you, that it was a little bit different. And I was on that select board call. I don't remember I don't remember exactly what. It was like a week before the June 11th meeting, but it was after our finance meeting. So yeah, I was going to send an email about it, but I thought that might violate open meeting law rules. So that's why I brought it up here instead. So that was something I did want to mention to the committee, that I and the chair of the Capcom committee went to that, and we were both a little surprised that that was what the topic was going to be. So, so I don't know if anyone else felt a little surprised by that, but I did want to bring it up as something that I noted. It
Yes,
wasn't
I was
what I was
surprised.
expecting it was to be.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, the February budget meeting is a good analogy, which I guess is a fine meeting, but yeah, I was more interested in having discussion.
Yeah, it just didn't seem
Obviously.
very productive. Yeah.
Although,
Yeah.
I mean, as much as I wasn't thrilled with the idea of just presentations, I have to say, for some reason, Jeff's demographic and, comparison presentation got through to me more than it had in other meetings or before. And it's not like I've certainly heard it before, but I have to say I left the meeting thinking, wait a minute, I left the meeting less likely to be in support of a school override. That's for sure. And I do think there's some things to think about with what Jeff has presented that, need to be talked, discussed, figured out, probed a little bit, certainly before. And, I don't know that a school override is likely either, but it's certainly been discussed. And I thought Jeff made a compelling case about, hey, wait a minute, is that really the answer? So, curious what other people thought. You're muted, Nathan.
Thanks. Yeah, I liked Jeff's presentation, and my big takeaway from the meeting was thinking about communicating with like the town and getting more information out there. We just got that flyer. I'm sure you all got the one from the water department with the quality of water. And why has like FinCom ever done anything like that? Send out like a mailer, like a state of the town finances to every household in town. I mean, we have like a small discretionary budget. We could probably afford to do that ourselves.
I don't know that we've ever sent a mailer out, but I think, Pete, you've been on the committee longer than me. I know we have included pamphlets in the ATM. Like they print a little thing and put it inside the thing they hand out at the meeting.
So, we've done a more comprehensive report on the budget. The vehicle to distribute that is generally town meeting, and we try to release it before we talk about the annual budget. I'm sure there's an older one on our website. And certainly, I mean, it is part of the kind of multi-year planning thing that we've always been talking about. Just for my line, mailings actually are kind of expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that we could easily do that. I mean, we could make the case if we had a really good thing to present, but
Well, even with like I think someone brought this up at the meeting, having a website, and I know there'd have to be someone who would administrate it and like create it, and that's work, but having a website that people could like scan a QR code or on social media link can go out to direct them to talk about these things, rather than like a physical mailing, but.
Yeah, I'm like something like really simple. Like I was just thinking about what the upcoming quad board subcommittee or whatever they're discussing, like what information can we get out? Like what would be most useful if we just had like one side of the page is like these are the 3 or 4 major Capcom projects that we're expecting that there might be an override about in the next like 2 years. This is what it might cost, just so it's on everybody's radar. And then on the other side have, I don't know, whatever like the 2 or 3 most relevant graphics might be, like not getting into the weeds, but just like, so everybody can have like a little, little primer on the town, and then have, our part of our function is to like investigate, the town finances. And, a lot of people in town talk about it, but don't really have like a source for like investigating further. We even just had like an email address for FinCom for people sending questions that we could like respond to, and just have that be on like a mailer that went out or something that would like publicize. That might give us some good direction. We'd be informing people's like direct questions that they had, and also like informing ourselves in the process.
We do have the main finance committee email that I do check ahead of the meeting, that people are always welcome to send questions or comments to. So that's I do get questions around ATM usually. There's a couple of citizens that usually will send questions in every year. Sometimes they send them directly to Greg, but it's fincom@townofmaynard.net is the main, like not owned necessarily by like any one of us. I know some of us do have town email addresses, so there is that possibility, like it could be tied back to that, if that's helpful.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just thinking about like how at annual town meeting there were a couple people came up and had a question, and then the response was like, "Okay, well, it's town meeting right now, and we have to vote, but we can get back to you in like a week or so with an email." And if we had like a little bit more publicizing your email, like the rest of the year.
But maybe I would just note that the one mailing the town does do every year is the annual town meeting warrant, which then has a big notice about our budget hearing, which is where people can come ask questions. And we do get some people showing up, but I don't know that we could actually do more than that, or expect a different result by doing something, I don't know. That's my concern.
Yeah. I mean,
Also-
the warrant for like meeting is like thick, and I'm thinking about sending out something that's basically like a postcard or like a single sheet of paper and
Yeah.
in color. But just the thought I was having.
Yeah, and I have some examples from other finance committees of what kind of reports they put in, and I'll talk about that on the next topic we have for the future planning. I can pull up some examples and show you what they look like. So I got an example of what that PitchBook software could make a website look like. But I don't know how much it costs. That's a mystery to me right now.
Yeah. Both out of last meeting and particularly, for upcoming meetings, I'm a little concerned that we don't, it's not diverted, but there was some discussion at the last meeting, toward the end of it, about informing people and how do we, get the message out, whatever that message is. And I get a little concerned about that takes the place of people who do really know something and are, pretty informed about town stuff, trying to, make a decision about what they would at least, recommend to town meeting, or in some cases make the actual decision itself, that the kind of let's educate everybody, that doesn't get us a decision. And we are going to be faced with serious decisions. Upcoming one, should we be doing bleachers? Is that the most pressing need? And I just don't know that telling more people about it gets us a better decision. It's people who have stepped up to spend some time learning about the issue, that I would argue, it's not that we're the ones who should make the decision, but effectively we do because we participate. And I just think there are some hard decisions coming, and there's no consensus on telling everybody about it, is my short take on it. So I just don't want to spend half of a meeting where we all get together talking about ways to educate people. We need to make some hardcore decisions. And they're not really FinCom decisions, but we certainly get to weigh in and tell the select board whether we think they're right or not, and then make recommendations to town meeting. So, anyway.
All right. Yeah, so I don't know. if since we're on the topic of June 11th, it would be good for me to pull up the minutes up for us to review, or we could review them at the end with all the other minutes. We have 3 minutes to review this time. I feel like I took a copious amount of minutes. So I don't know if you saw the select board minutes that Greg took. They were a lot more concise than the minutes I took. So I was like, oh, I haven't taken minutes in a while. This is a little verbose.
Yeah, I'm sure that Greg's would be brief.
Yeah. So, so I put that it was opened, and then we talked about the fiscal conditions. I took notes about Capcom. So basically they were talking about their 5-year plan. They talked about all the different assets and what a capital expense is considered. And then they talked about their different scenarios, which I appreciated. So they talked about having a certain amount of money for capital spending per year. And so this is made up of some line items that already exist and some additional line items that are like from free cash. And they talked about how, you know, right now it's really hard using just free cash to do more than $500,000 of any item. So like large items would like have to be either like a debt fund, like an override, or there would have to be some like line item for capital added that's a little larger than the current line item, I think of $50,000 for capital. And we talked about the debt threshold. So trying to stay under a 10% threshold for the debt, like overall debt of the town, to make sure we keep a good bond rating. And that was sort of their recommendations. Then we had our time. We discussed, I sort of briefly mentioned without a formal presentation, how we're talking about these 3-year plannings going at least 5 years back in the past to try to look for trends, and how we're gonna start talking to other finance committees in the area. So I'll show later on tonight, I'll show an example from Groveland. The school committee talked, so they talked about the future planning of their budget, going from 2.75 to 3.5, sort of showing a couple of different scenarios there. And they talked about how they can do shortfall funding by this, that, and the other thing. And then the select board talked about that demographics that was presented that Peter mentioned. And then we sort of had this open discussion section where we talked about, you know, the bleachers and how there's challenges because they would also need to run water and sewer there, which I thought was a good discussion to have. But we didn't really end up ranking anything necessarily. So, and that's sort of how I ended it. We didn't really prioritize any funding, but we'd like to have another meeting in August. Those are the notes. So, like I said, a little verbose,
Great.
but
I'd move that we approve the minutes of June 11th then.
Seconded.
all right, we have a first and we have a second. So I will stop sharing. I will take a roll call vote. Katie,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Linda.
Then.
All right, so, and I am a yes, so that's 4 yeses and 1 abstain. So that carries. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I think that is the main topics I had for the June 11th meeting. Unless we have additional topics, I have a topic that bleeds into it. So I'm actually going to pull up something from, so this is something that I shared the Capital Committee presentation, which was presented at that meeting, but they also shared, they've prioritized, so you know how we were asking them about their prioritization of all the things that they have in ClearGov? This is that list. So this is the list with all of their scoring scale. So it shows the, what the cost is, and then they rate it, I think it's on a scale of 1 to 10 for safety, compliance, cost, efficiency, master plan, new growth, and then they get a total score. And that's how they rank all of these different things. So these are ranked by the score. And then there's a little chart at the end that sort of shows you how each of these breaks down, what bucket they go into. But, you can look at the raw list here, and there's, a bunch of stormwater things on here, which we talked about are not part of the water sewer enterprise because they're not covered in that fund right now. And then there's other things. So like the roof for the clubhouse and a couple other items here. So I think it's good to see all of these things in one place and to get an idea of how they ranked. So this is like the aggregate score from the capital committee. So far, I haven't really seen a ranking like this from other boards. So I thought this was like a really interesting place to start from, to start thinking about what's coming up and what might not be captured in our future planning scenarios, because like I don't have foresight on some of these in that model because they're not going to be in the past for me to predict from there. So.
And now, Jillian, remind me, are all of these things paid for through, like there's other sources that cover some of these items, correct? Like
right.
for
So some
sidewalk,
of them,
roadway.
Yeah, so some of them might be covered by like grants. Some of them might be covered by debt servicing.
Well,
Or,
could
sorry,
be covered by
grants,
debt
yeah.
service. That would be, if we did a debt issuance. But no, this is,
Yeah.
I think the GF in the name, this is general fund. Now, it
Right,
is a
so
little,
this
the
is why
ambulance, I think, is supported by the ambulance receipts
receipt.
fund, but that's really the
Mhm.
only one.
Right. So these were some of the things they covered in their scenarios where they said if they did a certain override to get some debt servicing, they could cover a certain number of things. Is my understanding. So I think it might help if I share this one. So this is one of their examples where they were talking about, free cash would be a certain amount of money, and then debt and receipts could cover a certain amount of other capital items. So this is how they got their 1.25 million, and I think the other one was 1.5 million.
Sorry, what are receipts in this context?
I would assume that receipts would be ambulance receipts because ambulance is about
Yes.
300K.
Gotcha.
So, this was presented by the capital committee at that June 11th meeting. So this is some examples of something it could cover, but I think this is assuming we're going to have 800K in cash. And I think going forward, that's going to be very unlikely, in my opinion. I think that number is getting smaller every year because we're not going to have like large developments anymore. So I think I also shared with you, or I forwarded you the memo from Justin about how we like literally don't have water to support some new buildings they would like to put in town, like complexes. So I think this is the main concern currently, is how can we grow if we don't have water? So that's sort of a whole nother can of worms.
But one thing to note about those two memos, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is those were both like 400 unit developments.
They were really
So
big.
They were really, I thought they were really big too. And I'm not sure that's likely to happen in Maynard anyway. But it was useful to see the analysis.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it's useful to think, because if something does go into the areas where the MBTA zoning passed, I think, so something that big could technically go in that area, I think. I'm not on planning board, so I'm not an expert there.
On Powder Mill.
Yes, on Powder Mill.
Yes, on Powder Mill it could. You're right. Yep.
Yeah, so that's not the two memos that got sent around.
Wait, one of them was on Powder Mill though, wasn't it?
Was it? Oh, shoot, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I don't think it was that site, though. Actually, I don't know where that is.
All right.
111 Power Mill. Anyway,
Can I ask Katie a question?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this list of the prioritized projects,
Yeah,
and one of them fairly high on the list is
I saw that.
stormwater at Assabet and Fletcher Street.
yep.
And I'm assuming this is about stormwater and it's not really just paving Fletcher, but I mean, I don't know. So Katie and I both live in this neighborhood and probably drive down Fletcher quite a bit. And I mean, it rains, there's water that rushes down the street, but I guess I wouldn't have had that as a very high priority on a capital list for 1.2 million.
I
I'm
think
just curious,
that's
Katie, if
all
you-
this, yeah, I think that's all the storm drainage that they're gonna have to do prior to paving the 3 roads that were accepted. So it doesn't include Allen, but just because Jenny,
Yeah, I mean, Allen Drive, I could see. That's going to
Yeah.
cost the town a fortune.
yeah, Allen's
but-
gonna be bad. I don't know,
or-
Fletcher
or
though,
no.
like that's where the bus picks up the kids and it's really sketchy down there. So I don't know if it's a, like a danger thing that came up. What happens is the water doesn't, drain and it pools up, and then in the winter it becomes ice. And as cars come down, it's this pretty steep hill. And sometimes they don't stop,
Ah.
but I don't know if it's a danger thing, but I feel that it's not just Fletcher, that it might be drainage, but I don't know, because Heights Terrace isn't listed on there either. So I'm not sure.
It's interesting,
Yeah.
it gets a pretty high rating for cost savings, which I'm not quite sure.
I think if they pool that's why I think it is the 3 roads, because from what we were told, or Justin told us, is that if they pool together the 3 roads and do the project kind of all at the same time, that they get a discount for things. And so there's 3 roads that we are supposedly told that they're going to pave before winter this year. And it was not Assabet, but Fletcher, Heights Terrace, and Allen. So I'm not sure if that has to do with all 3 of those roads, but that is a big number. So I would think it's more than just Fletcher.
Right.
Is there any reason
Yeah,
to think the
I hadn't thought
stormwater
about
is going into the sewage? Or is it separate? Because I know some towns that's a problem. The stormwater goes in right into the sewer line.
I don't think this
No,
one that's
we
a
should
problem.
have-
It just doesn't drain.
Okay,
Yeah. It's more, so our stormwater is generally separate from the sewer.
yeah, it should be, but not, if
yeah.
it's old or it's an unaccepted street, maybe it doesn't.
And I do remember Justin,
Oh.
when he came to us, he was saying the cost to pave Fletcher versus do also the stormwater drainage is only like a $300,000 to $500,000 difference. And so I don't think that 1,200 is just for Fletcher.
Okay. All right. I forgot about the water and the ice at the bottom, and that may be big. Okay. I'm sorry. I just was looking for a reality check from, so, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
It is a lot.
I'll assume they're right then.
I didn't do the math, but Jillian, do you know, do they weight the different factors, or is it simple average of the 7 things, of the 6
that's a
things?
great question.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't do the math, but
I don't know. My guts say that I think it's just a straight average.
an straight average, yeah.
So that's a great question. Doing some quick math. Because it's not a spreadsheet, it's a PDF. so it's hard to do it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, it's a straight.
Straight average, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought this was useful to think about. The thing
Yeah.
that's not really on here is an indication of how long it's been on the list. So in the past, my understanding is that like some things that have just sort of languished on the list because they're really expensive and they can't be paid in one cycle, or, you know, some other reason, but they're still high priority. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily captured in this current list, but it is something that we've talked about as a committee in the past. I'm just trying to understand, you know, like, is something on the list, or is it going up the list a certain amount of time?
Yeah,
Or
I'd
are we
be
just
really
gonna put it on the
interested
list
to
and then
see
forget about
after
it?
a year or two, like how much stuff has been acted on and how much stuff is like just sitting at the bottom.
Yeah, and I think this might be better captured on the ClearGov website, on the tool that they shared with us. Which is funny because right now the rankings are not captured on that tool. So
Can I ask, is the DPW garage on here? I would have thought that would be like right in the top 10.
I think that happened after they finished their rating cycle.
Okay. Okay.
Well, no, I think that would be too large to be on this list. They
Oh, too
wouldn't
large.
think that the
Okay.
general fund's ever going to do it.
Okay.
That would have to be a separate debt issue.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
I think.
And then I noticed the golf course, the roof is on there, and then the building envelope is on there, which is kind of curious. So it's almost like it's double counted. I thought I
So the
saw.
envelope is everything except the roof. So that's like
Okay.
other building areas. So like the
Yep.
doors, it's basically everything that's on the walls and the floor. Is my understanding of what an envelope is. It's everything except the roof.
Okay.
I'm surprised the country club roof is right at the top.
Right.
I think it's at the point where if it's not repaired, it's going to make such damage to the building that you're just going to have to get rid of it. Is the impression I had. Maybe that's why it's near the top. And I know it's also important right now because that's where the senior center is currently meeting. But yeah, this is sort of a list I just wanted to share to give you an idea of how other committees are looking at. So in particular, this one is obviously the capital committee, looking at capital items and ranking them. And I also wanted to sort of put on the radar the stormwater, like, is a big cost. So I think having the town figure out how that's like, are we going to have a enterprise fund for stormwater? Like, how is that going to work? I don't know, but there's lots of items up on that list that are, most of the big ticket items on there are stormwater. So yeah. So I didn't have too much to share from this list, just sort of other than saying this is the list and the ranks, and this is something I know we've thought about in the past. But if we are going to jump into the future planning, I can give you an idea. Well, let's stop sharing. Let's share this screen. So one of the things that sort of came up at that meeting is like, what is finance committee thinking about? So I've made a base projection. So this now includes, I updated all the figures here for the 25 that were passed at the ATM. I am, and I did want to bring it up. Maybe someone on the committee has better eyes than I do. Maybe I made a mistake here, but for some reason I'm $10,000 off in the expenses. Like it doesn't equal to this number here, which is what the number was in the warrant. Like it doesn't zero out. So I don't know where
Ouch.
I'm missing $10,000 in the expenses, but Greg's on vacation, so I couldn't get an answer before our meeting tonight. So I was like, Greg, where's my typo? Because I'm pretty sure I copied these all from the ATM. But obviously something's off. So I did want to flag that. But then I started projecting out. So I'm taking the averages from the past couple of years and projecting forward 3 years. So, and this is something I'm not sure if it's the best way to do it, but I was doing the year-to-year difference to get the average, and then doing the next year-to-year and the next year-to-year and the next year-to-year and the next one, and then taking all of those and making an average. So it's like an average of an average, and I feel like that's not great math. I feel like there's a better way to do it. But regardless, the other concern I have is that some of these categories are really variable. So, so I'm not sure if there's a better way to estimate them going forward. But that's sort of how this is laid out. And I think we've talked about this in the past. The next thing I want to start doing is adding stuff in. So, for example, what would a $3 million override look like? That's like a one-time expense. So this would be an override. It would not be a, what do they call them? An operational override. So an operational override would add to your debt ceiling like forever. Like if it's a one-time override, it would just add that money and then that's it. So it would not add, and we'll see if I did the math right, because I could have messed it up. So if it's not an operational override, so for example, if I put a $3 million override in 26, going forward, it should not carry into your levy limit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is set up where it does not. So this is not an operational override, it's a one-time override. And it's just to show people that if we have an override for $3 million in this year, it's only, and then it will be taken out $3 million in the expense side for very specific costs. So for example, here I put it's $500,000 for new gas tanks at the DPW garage on Winter Street, because those are toast. $500,000 for the roof. The other would be, the rest of it, $770K would be paid from their receipts. And then the building envelope for $1 million and $1 million for stormwater. Say, these are just random numbers. No, they're not random, but I'm just saying this is an example for $3 million. So, and then you would use that to use for exactly that thing. You would still have like $425K almost in the red for the budget as it currently stands with the current trends, because you're using that $3 million for a very specific purpose. You're not adding it for operational stuff. So you're still going to have the same challenges you have in the budget. Like, to me, this is very obvious, but I'm not sure if this is the type of modeling people are expecting us to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone thinks like an override's going to fix everything, but it's not going to fix anything because it's for very specific costs.
Yeah.
But are people getting a feeling that's what like needs to be presented so people understand that's how it works?
Yeah, so different, because the capital planning group, it sounds like they wanted a line item in the operating budget. So they would have a $1.2 million every year. right? And then they would pick off their projects, and this would be a different model for funding some of the top priority projects. As you keep your operating
Right.
budget the same, because where are you going to find 1.2 in the operating budget every year? That's smelling of a systemic operational override, and this would be a different way to do it. It's kind of a one-time thing, knock off some
Yeah.
of those important capital projects, and then you go back.
Oops, these numbers are wrong. But yeah, so I mean, we could also, you know, any of us, and I think I sent the spreadsheet around so anyone can feel free to play with it. But, you know, we can say something else like, you know, say that we don't want the government to increase by 4%. We want it to only increase by 2%. Like, and then you can see how that changes the numbers, like further down the street.
Now, Jillian,
But, like,
are these
still-
percentages averages that you've seen over the past like timeline?
Yes. So these are averages from 2019 to 2024.
Okay.
So I didn't factor in 25 to them yet because it was just so new. And I think having 6 years is pretty good for those averages. I was trying to get years before COVID. Because maybe we'll settle back into those kinds of budgets.
I mean, one of the quirks with this that gets tricky, but anyway, the general government number isn't right. If you go down to the expenses for a second, there was some structural change to the budget in one of these years that shifted expenses into the general budget line item.
I think it was this
yeah.
year because Greg did all the utilities in his budget.
Well, there was one before that too.
Even before,
I think
yeah.
From the 2.8 million in, I can't see the year, but whatever, the third column in to the 3.3 million, I don't think that's a real increase. And even the 3.3 to the 3.5 would be high, but so there just are a couple of tweaks like that that make it tricky. But yeah, I think it would almost be, I mean, we'd have a better sense just to put a number in.
Right. And some of the numbers, and I was talking to Greg about it, he was like, you know, instead of using these averages, it might make sense just to use like 2.5%. And then just see what it looks like if you're just like, nothing can go above 2.5%. So, so these are examples for the averages. Let's look at expenses. So there's that year you're talking about, Greg, where the general government increased by 15%. Where I think Greg was saying that they switched FTEs into general government from the schools or something happened. I don't remember exactly, but you know, a lot of these are smaller. So these are the ones year to year, the differences. And then this is the average of these differences. That's how I'm currently calculating it now, but I feel like there might be a better way to do it. And for some of these ones that are really variable because the way in which they're structured changed, so like other accounts went somewhere else. You know, like this 16% is a really big outlier. And I think that was when the DPW took on some school grounds FTEs or something. I don't remember, to be honest. I'd have to go back and look at the notes from 2022 and 3. but so it's also possible we could look more closely at these and sort of figure out what are outliers and exclude them to get closer to what we think it might be. But, you know, even the schools, they had a couple years where the increase was almost 5%. And then the other years are closer to 2.7. And I think these, the capital service things are not going to be super accurate because, you know, the schools we had the Fowler School come off and now we have the Green Meadow go on. So these numbers have changed quite a lot. But I feel like they are somewhat predictable because we know the structure of the loans. So maybe we should think about that instead of using like averages of percent to do these predictions.
So, I mean, I still have my separate version of future planning that's like more line item based. That it's not
Yeah.
updated with our most recent budget, but you know, I have amended little bits and pieces to it all along the way. That I could share my screen if I have permission to.
If you don't, I can share. I can also make you a host, but don't hang us up. Don't hang up the phone.
So let's see here.
Yeah.
Okay, can you see my spreadsheet here?
Yep.
So,
For me, it's blurry, but it could just be my old eyes.
oh yeah, sorry, it's like.
Can you maybe zoom in a tiny bit? Thanks.
Oh yeah, mine too.
So let's see here. So for instance, and this is where it starts, my projections. So for the school, and this is what the superintendent just said at like the quad board meeting. I think he said that it was a 3.1% increase for the teacher contract. So I just set the salary sum to go 3.1, 3.1, and then he said it was 2.8 there. So that's pretty, I mean, that's exactly what the school is saying it's going to be right now. Same thing here for maintenance. I mean, this was more of an estimate. Yeah, the average annual increase, and then I think he suggested 3% here. And then down on, trying to think of another one, that solid waste. You know, we know that our current contract for hauling ends after this fiscal year. So for FY26, I just punched in 20%. I think that's what Justin said at our meeting we had with him at one point. And this is when the 20-year incinerator contract ends. So our solid waste bill is going to go up really high. I don't remember if I put it in 100% or if that's something he threw out. But you know, this is something where we could punch in if we have like the fire department. I don't even know if this is where like the vehicles are. Let's see. But you know, if we knew when a capital expense was coming up, if it's in one of these line items in the department, we could punch in the our increases at that point. This is, you know, more like micromanage-y, but is probably would be more accurate than doing an average of the increases over the last 6 years. I think
this is great. He'll go detailed.
Greg had thrown out putting a 2.5% salary increase for every position. So that's kind of what's in here. And then that rolls up to the top of the category. So I'm assuming here that all the library expenses are the same each year, except for the salary increasing. And if that's the case, then the total of that is a 2.2% increase each year.
Okay.
And taking, you know, Superintendent Haas's, is that how you say it, Haas?
Yeah.
Using his numbers where, salary goes up 3.1 and well, expenses go up 3%. It averages out to slightly less than 3.1%. And then here where the teacher contract goes down is 2.8. And solid waste. Same thing. It would go up theoretically 13.4% and then 17.2% when that second incinerator contract expires. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any way to push the receipt side? Jillian, did you look at receipts, or did anyone talk about receipts? I know there was the possibility, I think the state allows towns to increase taxes like restaurant taxes and some other taxes. Is there anything there that we should look at?
We can. I have not modeled such projections. I think that at one of our last joint board meetings, it wasn't the one in June, but it was the one before that. I think one of the select board members was pretty adamant about, looking at meals tax and some of these other taxes. But other members were worried that that might discourage people from eating in Maynard. I know we have a lot of restaurants. So I'm not sure, but that is something maybe we could ask. I don't know who the right person would be to ask about that. Maybe Greg. And then Greg might refer us to like the assessors or the collector's office for more information. And I think, something else I did want to bring up is that right now the select board has a 30-day open notice period they are considering entering the whole of Maynard into a collective bargaining isn't the right word, but it's basically, how you get those pamphlets in the mail for deciding who will source your electricity. So you can decide that, and they can lock your rate in for a certain amount of time. And it only, there's the delivery fee, and there's two fees that is made up of the electric bill. This company would just do one, and you would still get your bill from Eversource, but you would get your electricity sourced from whoever this vendor is, and there'll be a couple different choices. This was at one of the past select board meetings. So that's something that they're looking at potentially enrolling the town in. And one of the things that could be added onto this is basically a management fee for the town to provide this service to the townspeople. They could add on sort of like a tax. So it would sort of be like a receipt. So it would be like another source of potential income if they do decide to add that on. But it's a lot of unknowns. I don't know how much that would be, how many people in the town are going to enroll, what the rates would actually be, because they won't tell you what the rates are until they know how many people are going to enroll. But the thing I thought was interesting is that it's an automatic opt-in for every single resident in the town. If you don't want to do it, you have to opt out and fill out this paperwork. So if you have any input there, I think the 30-day period is probably up in another couple weeks. But that's all on the select board website on board docs. So something like that could potentially be another receipt if they do go that route.
Yeah, I think that receipt would be very little and really only cover the, whatever administrative costs there might be. I don't think that's going to be much of an income generator for the town.
I don't think so.
This program is supposed to be pretty good, though. It should result in cheaper electric rates. So
I was just going to ask, would that lower our overall cost, which would be great.
That's the goal.
Yes, it's one of the, there's all the scam stuff with energy suppliers.
Yeah.
Everybody calls you trying to get you. This is a real thing And it's supposed to be a pretty effective, good thing,
Awesome.
at least from what I know.
Yeah. So I think that just popped into my brain while we're talking about receipts, unrelated. But I did want to let you know about that is existing as a potential way to hopefully save the townspeople money.
Where on their site is the information on that?
On that electric thing,
Mhm.
it should be on the select board website. If you go double check.
In board docs or the like the page on the Town of Maynard website?
That is a great question. I went to that meeting, so I'm not sure. Supposedly they were going to put a link on the actual select board website too. I think it was on the main, it was on the main Maynard website. So it's under latest news. So I can just, there's no chat here. Oh, I gotta reclaim host or I can't share anything. Let's see. I think you might have to give me host back. I think it's gone
Oh.
forever.
Let's see. How do I do that?
I got it. We're good.
Yes.
So if you're on the Town of Maynard website, it's this first one right here, Maynard Power Choice 30-day public comment period. So public comment until July 8th. So, and this is the link here is the website. So there's a email you can email to if you have questions or anything like that. And then they have the draft. So this is basically, I guess, what was presented at the select board meeting. So there's the sample opt-out documents and also a draft plan. So we can go to town hall. They also have physical copies there too.
Cool.
Okay. Sorry, I was a little tangent. I got a little distracted. Yeah, but I think the future planning, we have some interesting stuff there. And I think now we have some ways that we can start to think about what we should start putting in there. I think that the capital committee brought up some interesting, if we want to start thinking about some of the main things. So got too many pages open. So for example, the capital committee at the June 11th meeting said, these might be the 4 biggest capital things that are coming up. So the school is obviously already passed, and that's already captured in my future projection models. So the annual debt is a little around $3 million. But, they're saying, if we build a senior center, maybe that's 12 million. These are all estimates. The bleachers might be 3.5. The DPW building might be 24 million. So, and they put in some suggestions of maybe when we want to think about starting these projects. So, the DPW in 2030, the bleachers in 2027. These are all estimates that they were talking about of when we might want to think about putting them on. But, obviously the town might need some of these things sooner than later. But they were saying if we went with a 5% rate, which is just an estimate, like if the DPW costs $24 million, that would be about 1.5 million a year. So these are like, if we start thinking about different scenarios where we put these in, we can get an idea of how much the budget costs but this will end up just like that scenario I presented where it's in the income as a 1.5 million, and then it's in the expense as a 1.5 million because they're assigned to a specific project. So it's not going to change any shortcomings we have with the operational costs. Does that make sense?
So in the budget you showed, the revenue increased in the initial year, and then went back down the following year. But if we were taking out a loan, if we were bringing on like debt to do it, then we're paying off that 1.5 million a year or whatever the for the DPW garage. So is that the same thing or is that something different? Is your $3 million override like assuming that we just like raise the tax and we pay it in cash?
So it's a capital override. So like right here, this is where we start adding the school, right? This is the first year in 2025 when we have the school here.
Mhm.
And it's a debt exclusion. So it's excluded debt. So that means it's not up here and it's not touching your levy limit. So if we do an operational override, so these numbers here, so this number is a sum of your prior levy limit, your 2.5 increase, and your new growth. And that's how you get your total new growth. And then that becomes your next number here is your levy limit. If we do an operational override, that'll increase this number by $2 million or whatever number we have.
Gotcha.
That's right, Peter, right? That's how an operational override works. You actually change the levy limit.
It gets added, yes, it gets added to the taxes for the prior year that's subject to the 2.5% increase.
Okay, thanks. But the way that this is broken out now, I don't think that's how Green Meadow is because it's excluded, right?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I laid the spreadsheet out correctly then. Okay, good. Yep. Yeah. So this is how this tab is laid out right now. So it's laid out as not changing the levy limit. It would just be like what we did for the school. So it's like we collect a certain amount of money to pay directly for the school. So it's not changing your operational costs at all. So if we did the same thing here, it would just change the numbers, but you have it taken out in the expenses. So it's sort of like, it's like you have one number on your numerator and the same number on the denominator. So it just zeroes it out. So it doesn't give you extra money to change this $423,000 shortfall in your operational costs. But I mean, we could make a new scenario where we actually do an operational override, see what that does. But you can't have positive money. Like this number, the expenses and the revenues always have to equal zero. So if we add like $2 million for an operational override to increase our revenues, then you have to make sure that the number at the end of the day is still zero. Does that make sense? So we would have to put a line item in expenses and say, we're going to do a blah, blah, blah override. So we're going to, I don't know, put in a $500K capital item. We're going to increase the school budget by whatever, and we're going to increase this other budget by another %. So basically you would play with these expense numbers until it would zero out. And these are all scenarios that we could propose. But I think something that I don't have on the spreadsheet that Greg said is not easy to do is to tell me, if our total budget is this number what, for a single average tax bill, what does that equate to? So like, you know, if the total budget is, say we did like a $3 million operational override to make the budget closer to 60 million, what does that mean? Like, how much would that raise someone's taxes? And I think that's something that's important to know, but it's not something, from my understanding of talking with Greg, like he can't just plug a number in. Like if I have what the total budget is, he can't tell me what the single tax bill is.
Correct, but we can actually, I think, yeah. We can say how much a $3 million override would be, not so much the overall tax bill, but how much an extra $3 million would be, about $600 per average family. So,
But that's not
this
just
is
a debt override, right?
yeah, but same thing. It's $3 million more charged to the taxpayers.
How did you get to
Okay.
$600 from that?
So there was a sheet, Angie Manamera, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher her last name, who used to be the assessor, did for financing the Green Meadow School, where she walked through a couple of scenarios. And, you know, one of the scenarios was a $46 million town contribution to the school, which would have been, you know, a yearly debt payment of $2.99 million, which she said resulted in an average increase in taxes of $613 per family, you know, per tax bill. So that's where I'm getting that from. And it, you know, for those purposes, it doesn't matter whether we're spending the $2.99 million on capital or a debt or on operating.
Mm.
Yeah, it's about, no, that's the debt number, right?
You know what that was called? Maybe I have it in my files. I can pull it up.
Green Meadow New School. Yeah, I'll send it around. It's called New School FY23 Estimated Tax Cost Breakdown. Which if we want, I mean, if you want to let me share, I can share it, but I
Oh,
did
yeah.
just email it to everybody.
There you go. You can share.
Let me see if I can make this share what I want. All right, can you see this?
Yep.
Okay. So this is her estimating it. And this isn't exactly straightforward because she starts talking, you know, here she's saying this estimated 1205. That's for both current debt exclusion and new school debt exclusion. So you have to look at just this, you know, the cost of just the new school. So for 37 million, she was saying it would cost 567. And that, someplace she has, where did I get it? I thought she had yearly amounts on here. Oh yeah, this is the yearly amount. So, you know, here, I don't know how to shift this around. I can't You guys are blocking my view. But this, estimated for 46 million. So the new school debt exclusion, for 46 million would cost us 2.99 million. And she was saying that would cost, that 2.99 million per year would be our debt payment for the 30 years. And she was saying that would cost $613 per average family, average something family tax bill.
Single family?
I don't know what the S stands for.
Average single
Average
family.
single family tax bill, right? So anyway, that's where I'm saying, $3 million additional taxes is roughly $600 per average single family house. And I did email this to people, so. Any questions, or I'm gonna stop sharing and. Okay. And how do I can you just take this back? Oh, wow, I have all these little buttons I've never seen before.
Yep.
A security
I can
button.
take
I wonder what I can do with that. But if you want to take it back, Jillian.
Yep. Put it back. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I forgot. That's one way to look at it, so that's good. Oops. Okay. Yeah, so I
Greg
think
is
that's
hesitant to share any kinds of numbers like that. You really got to push to get any kind of just ballpark numbers. They hate to give them out because they might be wrong. So,
right. And I mean, I think we just need an estimate to be able to talk about this to people intelligently.
yeah, exactly. Wait, will you put your forecasting thing up again for 1 second?
Yes.
Will you go to the top?
Yep.
Wait, I'm sorry. What's the FY25 column?
That's a typo. It should be 26. Let me double check. Are these the same? No, these are the same. So this is 25. So
But
I need
there
to
is some
actually
increase
accept
there.
that.
All right, that I was interested that we only had a deficit of 150,000. The thing this spreadsheet's particularly useful for, and I don't know what you have in for an education increase, but people start saying, oh, we really should be doing 5% increase for education, say, and it creates this huge deficit in the budget.
Yeah.
And then, well, let's do an override. But the problem with the kind of operational override is it really just solves it for 1 year. We spend
Right.
the extra 600,000. We then, have the same 5% increase on everything, and we have the same deficit the following year. But it does.
Yeah. So this was my
this-
projection. So I wanted to see, using my averages, how close it was to what the ATM actually was. Does that make sense?
Oh,
So I was
yeah, they're quite
I was
useful.
like-
yeah,
150-ish off.
which is probably the health insurance cut.
Probably.
Right. So,
Uh,
I mean, you were saying earlier we won't have as much free cash. And one of the big things will be the health insurance. We're not being as liberal about budgeting that.
Right. Yeah. So, and you can sort of go down here and see like how different I am from the yellow column, which is what was in the ATM warrant. And this is, using my averages, what these numbers actually ended up being. So, not terrible.
Yeah.
But, like I wanted to use it as a proof of concept, which is also why I didn't roll this last year into the averages I was making.
Is this in the materials? Is this on board docs or?
Yes, this is on board docs. This spreadsheet is.
All right.
I'm still not sure entirely why I'm $10,000 off though, which is why I'm kind of annoyed. for what was in the ATM warrant. Because the total expense number is $10,000 different than all the line items. And I'm like, what the heck? So. Yeah, but it was pretty close. So using my averages, I was kind of close to what the number was. I was like 150 different. So
Yeah. So I think it's pretty good.
I mean, considering the budget is like, you know, $50 million or whatever, like 150 million thousand is not a large percent off. I would say it's probably within, it's less than 10% error. So I think that's not terrible.
Impressive.
So that's sort of my proof of concept, saying like you can actually project. It's not perfect, but it's not like disgustingly wrong. So yeah, that was a new update I wanted to share with you all. So going forward, I was trying to figure out what those numbers might be for the next 2 years, and then, you know, I could extend it out another year to 28. But you know, I feel like if we're doing more than 1 year, that's a great thing. So let's try 2-3 years and go from there. But that was sort of my sanity check. Is this model even close, or is it garbage? And I don't think it's that bad. But, you know, I really like, Nathan, how you're laying out very specific things, but I'm trying to think of something that, you know, town hall might actually update. I think that we could definitely go through and do like line by line. And, you know, maybe you'll say there's a certain number here that you might suggest I change, like, you know, general government shouldn't be 4.9% based on my big line items. It should be like 3% or some other number. And we can adjust it that way. And I think that's where your spreadsheet will come in really handy, is like for some of these ones that are really different because different line items went into different budgets or they just moved around a bit. That's something I can't capture in this one. But if we can sort of get this in a place where we're comfortable with it, like this might be something we might be able to get other people in the town to use and like think about. And so like someone would feel comfortable saying, you know, I want $3 million override for the bleachers or whatever they want it for. What does that do? And you're like, well, it's not going to, you're still going to have like a shortfall in your operating budget because an override doesn't touch that, you know. So I think this is sort of where I'm hoping to bring this tool to like help people be educated on that at like a high level.
And I like that it's like you can read this pretty easily. It's not, you know, you don't have to like dive through the weeds to really see the important numbers, which makes it a little more easier for people to understand, I think, too.
Yeah. That's the hope.
Just sorry, on the $10,000,
Yep.
it's the DPW.
It's the DPW. I got a typo there.
Yeah, should be 2657. 164.
265.
Good catch.
Not 4. Thank you. That was bugging me. Public Works. Let's change it on both of them. Perfect. Thanks, Peter.
Sure.
Yeah, so, and obviously we don't have what the new growth is yet for this year either. So, you know, that's also something to consider too. So, but as you can see, like it went up when we had, this is the developments here, and now it's going down potentially. And that's something to consider with some of the future budgetings that'll also directly impact what free cash is too. you know, and is 350 the right number going forward? Is it gonna go back to being closer to like 250 again? So in 2019, it was closer to like 290. So yeah. So this is
Yeah.
something that I encourage people to play with. This is on board docs. I did also email it around to y'all with everything that was open tonight. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say.
Can I just throw one thing in for Nathan? You know, I'm sure you probably see it too, but just, I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to look at that detailed stuff you were doing and have that roll up into this format.
Mhm.
I mean, that stuff all has, you know, department numbers and stuff that we could, you know, could then correspond to the general government, public safety, public works lines. And so that, you know, you could do something like, okay, we're going to do 2% on all the line items, except salary should be X, and we think this is going to, you know, some significant line item might be slightly different than 2%, and then have that, you know, essentially pulled into be summarized into a spreadsheet that looks like this, that people are all familiar with. But it, you know, it does increase the maintenance of it. Takes somebody a lot better in Excel than just, you know, typing in the warrant numbers into this single piece. So,
Mm.
Yeah, that could be cool. It might be complicated, but once you sort of get it set in place, putting new numbers in the future would be the hardest part was making the spreadsheet, like making the base of it. So
yeah.
awesome. Oh shoot, I should have. All right. Do we have any additional topics that you want to touch base on for this future planning stuff? Mhm. All right. Okay. Yeah. So I might, you know, share this around. So I think it sounds like our next like quad meeting might be some point in August. So I think maybe at that meeting it might be good to present something like this to them. I think that's that might be helpful. Might also be helpful to get some feedback from Capcom on how and understand exactly where some of their scenario planning, what lines their money comes out of, because I don't think all of it was from free cash. I think some of it was from us stuff that already exists. Like there's some capital items that we're paying for already. And I know there's a $50,000 line item for capital, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, one of their biggest funding sources that, you know, they're trying to advocate for is that as we stop having to pay for debt because it's paid off, that we don't cut the capital budget and use the money for other things. So
Right, it goes into
I
like
think,
a reserve fund or something.
yeah, or yeah, some kind of. So if you look at the difference, so, you know, even so, there's on Jillian's spreadsheet, you know, the debt service non-exempt. If you go down a couple of rows.
Mhm.
Yeah. So here, you know, we had debt service non-exempt as 253,000 in, I don't know, whatever that is, FY20. And Right now, it's down to 120 or 106,000. Rather than save that money as debt or to use for debt, we, essentially used it other places in town. So their biggest thing for debt funding is that we don't let the budget fall. And if, we just take the money and put it in the capital reserve, or they get to spend it, or it's used to do, some new debt that they just don't want to see the budget reduced and the money spent elsewhere. That's one of, and even, as you look at, well, I mean, this is weird because you got Fowler dropping off from the 3.5 to 2.5. So that's not a fair one. But, I mean, if we had just not let this capital line decrease, I mean, we would have now a capital budget, for the 125, 150,000 a year, that they're trying to advocate for.
Yep.
Peter, how do we get non-exempt debt? Does it department or through Greg can just say we're gonna borrow this money? Is it if it's under a certain level? Yep. Okay.
Yes, I mean, it certainly would have to go to the select board. It's not something
Yeah.
Greg could authorize.
Yeah.
I think one of the bigger pieces, we've done some small stuff, but
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this a meeting or two ago, but we did do a $3 million bond issue to do capital improvements around town. Whether we were wise or not, whatever. We had a town administrator who was really hot to start doing improvements, and he convinced us to do a $3 million debt issuance that then is funded through this line.
Through this line, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we had a very productive discussion. Gave me lots of ideas, so I appreciate that. Okay. For one of our other topics, I did put on here the end of the fiscal year updates and any reserve fund transfers. Greg's obviously not here, so he's on vacation. So I'm hoping to revisit that at our future meeting. So we have a meeting on July 8th, but he didn't think the transfers would be ready by then. So I was talking to him and to Kevin. They want to talk to us on July 22nd, which would be our next meeting in July, after the July 8th meeting.
Okay.
So I just wanted to put that on your radar. I sort of asked them when these transfers have to happen, because I thought it was July 15th. But maybe there's some flexibility there. And I also want to make sure if we have any questions or we want to do follow-up diligence on them, that we would actually have time and we wouldn't have to approve them at that meeting, or I don't know what would happen, like the DOR would be mad at us because we didn't approve budget transfers. So that's something I want to understand the logistics of, because if that's the case, then I might reach out to you, or we can talk at our July 8th meeting if we have to, if it would be better for us to have a meeting the next, I don't know what date that is, July, like whatever the week after that is. Because he basically, the 15th? Yeah.
Yep.
So like the 15th instead of the 22nd. But I'll see, because I'm not even sure if he'll have them ready by the 15th. So, but that's something I wanted to let you all know, that it's on the list. I'm probably going to continue to put it on the agenda just in case something is ready for us. It will be on our agenda for July 8th, which is our next meeting, which leads into our next topic. So July 8th is the meeting that Dick Downey opens. So the town moderator always opens the first meeting of the fiscal year. And then he'll call the meeting to order. He'll sort of set out his vision of what the finance committee is going to do during the year. And he's going to talk to us and sort of review our performance in the last year. And then we'll vote as a committee for the chair, the vice chair, and the scribe or the secretary. So, and I think that's one of our agenda items tonight, is to sort of talk about the roles on the committee. And so when Dick is like, who would like to be the chair, let's vote for someone. We're not like, no, I don't want to do it. So, so I think I wanted to sort of talk and gauge people's desires for different roles on the committee. I'm not asking us to take a vote tonight, but I'm just asking like if people would like to do other roles. So I will say that the chair is a lot. And I am not really interested in coming to in-person meetings. And I'm not sure that that's effective for us as a committee, for the representative of the committee to not be in person. So, you know, I'm definitely open to changing roles. And I also have some personal items that have come up in the last couple of weeks. So, you know, I think my 2.5-year-old dog might have cancer. So I might have to step back from the committee a little bit. So if someone else would like to be chair, that might help me out. So I did want to bring that up as a topic. So that we sort of have an idea at the July 8th meeting of who would like to do what and who would definitely not want to do X, Y, Z. So, and I think one of the other questions we have is, you know, I think Kevin has not come to the past couple meetings, so maybe I need to send him a message to see if he still would like to be on the committee. I can't remember the last meeting he was at. Maybe it was in May. But I haven't seen a message from him saying that he's going to be absent either. So I'm a little concerned.
Is there a volunteer to take Khadijah's place that you know of?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, so we do have a new appointed member. So we will be
Okay.
back to 7 members on the July 8th meeting. So this is going to be tricky for me. Nathaniel, not Nathan, is going to be joining the committee. So I do believe that they know each other though, but that he will be joining. So he's very excited about it. So we do have a 7th member now. We also have another person who expressed interest in joining, which is why I'm gonna double check and make sure Kevin would still like to be serving on the committee. So they could potentially be another member.
Are we allowed alternate members as a committee, like as is?
I am not aware. That's a good question.
Don't think the charter has anything about that, but I mean, I think we could make someone an honorary member.
I know we've talked about having like a subcommittee before where they like work on certain topics. And I think that from my remembrance of those discussions, like something like that is allowed. But they wouldn't be like a voting member.
Jillian, in reaching out to Kevin,
Yeah.
are you you're keeping Dick Downey in the loop? Or
That's a good point. You think I should CC him on that email?
I mean, Kevin's been a while now. So, I mean, if we have someone who wants to be more participatory, you know, I would make sense. I mean, I don't know. In some ways, yeah, Dick could be the one to approach Kevin and say, "Hey, what's up, dude?" But yeah, up to you, totally. I don't, yeah, I don't want to be ratted out, Gavin, to Dick Downey, but,
I gotta check my sent folder because I feel like I sent him one last time. But I'll do that offline. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's, sort of getting the pulse of people. If anyone else would like to be chair.
all right.
Um,
I guess I'm gonna lead off by saying, most of you don't even know this, so I apologize for seeming like the old guy, but, I was chair for like 10 years and feel like I've done my bit on that. So I, am not interested in being chair. So I'm just gonna throw that part out there. Which doesn't really help, but, just so people know where I'm coming from on that.
Yep, I was aware, but I appreciate you sharing with the committee. And we appreciate your still coming and that we have that knowledge from you. So thank you.
Well, what do you think, Katie?
Huh.
Vice chair.
I always feel like I don't know enough yet. That every meeting I learn something new, and it's like, oh, yeah, I feel you should know everything as a chair, and like, I don't know. The time commitment too, Jill. How much time do you think, a month you spend on preparing documents and research? And I mean, I guess it depends.
After every single meeting, I would say I spend like an hour after the meeting sending out, the draft notes, the posting for the next meeting, the meeting to be posted, the recording. And so I probably spend like an hour after the meetings, which is why I try to like end before like 10 o'clock so I can just finish it before 11. And a lot of it is sort of chasing people down for the next meeting and being like, can you come and do this presentation and things like that. So, and then I have to post everything on Board Docs too. So, and that could potentially be like something maybe we spread out too. So like if we want to do that, so like, if the scribe wants to send the minutes to the clerk that are approved and things like that, and, the vice chair could post things on Board Docs, or like, if we could spread some of the stuff out, it would be helpful if no one else is going to be chair. So that's my 2 cents. It's like the mundane things that are just driving me crazy. I just don't want to do them anymore. But like, I want to like get really dug into my spreadsheet and the future planning, and I feel like I can't do it because I have to do all this other stuff.
Yeah, we should delegate that stuff.
Yeah.
I think that would be, yeah, definitely. Like one of us could be in charge of, contacting the people to come to our next meetings. One of us could be in charge of posting to Board Doc. We can maybe divvy up those tasks. I'd be a fan of that.
Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing is that no one else wants to be chair. Is that what I'm hearing? You don't want to be chair yet, Katie?
Still, I'll even do all of those mundane tasks, but not.
Jillian,
Okay.
you've done such a good job.
I know it's the running the
Yeah, but I'm
part.
not.
We got through so much work
I'm not
this
gonna
year.
go.
I was amazed.
I'm not going to go to in-person meetings, and the remote access is only until 2025. So I just want to let you know that if the remote access runs out and it's not renewed, like,
Then
I'm
I will
just not on the
step up.
finance committee anymore. So
I will do it then, Jill. I promise.
okay.
I don't think Zoom is going away.
I don't think it is either, but I hope it isn't. Like, I love and appreciate all of you, but I just don't want to sit in town hall for like 3 hours every other Monday. So much easier to do it just on Zoom. I think it's more accessible personally. Okay. All right. So if no one wants to be chair, who wants to be vice chair?
I can
You
stay in
still
that
want to be vice chair?
position. Yeah. And then I delegate like all to most of that stuff. It'd probably be good for me to learn how to do all that anyway.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to help take your load off some.
Okay. I think the first thing would be board docs because I absolutely hate posting things on board docs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
so
we
can
have a
make sure you
Zoom,
can get-
like an offline Zoom together, and you can show me kind of what you do.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
I could be
All
the
right. And I
scribe if
think
you
the other.
want.
Okay. That would
Linda,
be
you
much
take good
appreciated.
notes. I'd
Unless
approve.
somebody else wants it.
I won't fight you for it, but I could do scribe stuff.
Linda, I think your notes are great. I think it's a
Okay.
perfect fit for you.
I think you
Okay,
would take
thank you.
fantastic notes, Linda.
All right. Well, if you want, you could be the alternative if Linda's
Yeah.
not able to make the meeting.
I'll be vice scribe.
Sounds good. All right. Okay. That's helpful. Yeah, so we obviously, I think we obviously were, I would assume, at the meeting last year where Dick opened it. So I'll just pull up the schedule for next time so you can get an idea. Oh, I have too many windows open. Okay. So this is going to be the meeting on July 8th. So basically the town moderator will open it. He'll delegate a temporary secretary, whoever he feels like it. And they'll take notes until we open up until we do the actual nominations of the different roles. And then they'll take over from there. And then we'll just go into our normal meeting. So I'll put on here end of fiscal year budget updates and reserve fund transfers in case we get them, but I don't think we'll get them until the next meeting in July. I'll put future planning on there. So if we want to go over the scenarios like we did today again, I might have time to make a couple more estimates, like changes and things to the budget. And then there'll be sort of the routine stuff. Are there any other topics for our meeting next time that people are like super passionate about that should also be on this agenda that I'm missing?
I'm not even quite sure how to like define or describe this. I think it would be helpful to have a discussion at some point about, I don't know, like what our parameters about like what we think the budget should be. Like, should we be advocating for any specific like positions on the budget? Like, should we be advocating that the Capcom gets a $100,000 budget, or that we put X amount of dollars into paying down debts that we have? Yeah, I just I think it would be helpful to have some idea of like our general goal for the town budget.
So I would say just as one person that this in the future planning we've done in the past. So Bob McCarthy was a big advocate of this, and I think you've heard me talk about him before. He made a bunch of different scenarios so that people could see what things look like. And a lot of the scenarios at that time were sort of based off of things that other people brought and said, you know, if we only did this way, then it would save everything. So, you know, if we only increased, you know, the town school budget by 5% every year, it would save our education and blah, blah, blah. So we sort of listened at that time to all these different big items that people were, or, you know, key items that people were talking about that were important to them. And, you know, some people might have said it's all about the trash stickers. So we actually looked at the trash sticker lines and things like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a very large cost item, but it was sort of what people were talking about at the time. and they wanted to see modeled because they felt that they had the answer to solve different challenges that were being faced. So I would say my feeling was that at the time we did a lot of things based on sort of the public sentiment. But I think we are free to do this modeling ourselves as well. Our main role is sort of to inform the townspeople of, to let them make informed choices at the annual town meeting and the special town meeting, especially on things that have impacts on the budget. You know, you can look on our charter and things like that. So, for example, update transfers, here it is. So I'm gonna open, so if you go to, so if you see, this is board docs. So this is the meeting for today. So I was looking, this is the finance committee that was recommended to us that uses the budget book. And then this is sort of, this ClearGov website is what we have posted right now for Maynard. So this sort of gives you an idea of the population, the incomes, and all these other things, and the revenues and expenses. But this is only updated to 2021 for Maynard online. So it's a couple years behind, but it gives you an idea of the revenues, you know, where does the money that we raise every year, most of it is from property tax, some of it's from state aid, local receipts, transfers, and other stuff. So, so if you look, this sort of breaks down our budget, but it only is up to 2021. And then the expenditures. So, so if you enter your property tax amount, you can actually see, this can be customized. So if you know what your property tax is every year, like, I don't know, maybe it's $10,000. And then it'll tell you what your contribution is towards education, employee benefits, public safety, debt service. So like, this is another way you can sort of get an idea of how your taxes are spread out over the year. So what like the big line items that I have in my spreadsheet. But it's you know, it's older. So if you look at, and this is sort of the vanilla version of ClearGov, if you will. This is the town of Groveland, and they pay for the budget book. So if you look, they have a history of the city. They got demographics. So this is very similar to what Maynard has, and it sort of breaks out the population and what they look like and all this other stuff. And this link is on the website, the board docs website. There's also a link to their financial policies. So we also have financial policies as like a committee, and they're on the Town of Maynard website. They're not directly linked on ClearGov, but they are on the website. And you can click, and this would open their financial policy. There's an overview of the budget. So theirs is broken out. There's more words here, and it's telling you like what it actually funds and all these different things. So like, if we had this budget book, we could make something like this. And so this could, and this is kind of similar to our annual report that we give, but that's not necessarily on the website like this. And then this tells you like all the different like overviews of the budget, and then the budget goals. So like what the goals are, and these are pretty consistent, I would say, across the towns. And then you can actually look by department. So if that's important to you. So say you want to look at the, I don't know, Oops. I want to look at the trash and recycling collection department. So, and this is, you know, typed out for each of the different departments, and it gives you a little write-up about like a blurb. And then it tells you about the expenditures over the past couple of years and then projected out. So it gives you the actual and budgeted, but not, you know, the actuals aren't ready yet for 24 and 25. It just has what the budgeted are. So, and you can actually click and open the spreadsheet too. So, and it gives, so this is sort of like your spreadsheet where it has the account IDs and everything's broken out and the percent changes are listed too. So this is what that budget book software can look like. And it also has the enterprise funds on here too, which are separate from the general fund budgets. So thought it was kind of interesting. But it's definitely, I would assume this is a lot of work to maintain.
Can I respond to that question though,
Yes.
from Nathan? Just, I mean, I guess I'm going to say I have a slightly different take. So, you know, a lot of our function is to, you know, I guess, educate voters and town meeting and town meeting and stuff. I definitely think there's a role for us to advocate stuff like that, though. You know, I don't know what the specific, you know, whether it's 100,000 for capital, let's say. And I think it kind of takes two forms. So one, you know, you as an individual member can advocate stuff like that. You know, just through our regular meetings when Greg is here saying, Greg, I really want to see capital line in the budget. I think that's totally appropriate. As a second kind of level, you could lobby that FinCom take an official position, and I don't know, that's a slightly higher bar, and we generally have not done that. We don't, I mean, in the past, we have not come out saying, you know, we think the DPW needs a minimum 5% increase. Instead, you know, we tend to operate more as individuals, and then, you know, ultimately we're all trying to lobby Greg or then the select board to make changes to the proposed budget. You know, it all feeds into, you know, you could be saying, I'm really not sure I can recommend a budget at town meeting unless it includes a capital line. I mean, that's our ultimate stick, you know, both you as an individual and then we as the FinCom, that's our ultimate stick. But I think it's, yes, I think in some ways it would be better if people were advocating more strongly for things they favored in the budget. That, you know, too much is Greg doing it on his own. And, you know, I don't know how much lobbying Greg gets from the select board. That they, you know, maybe he gets a lot of private communication saying, I really want to fund DPW more. I don't know. But in general, they're fairly milquetoast in public, and don't really advocate anything. And it's all, you know, we generally operate from Greg's budget. And that's really it. And we make very few changes after he presents it in February. So I would certainly encourage people to advocate things that they feel strongly about. So.
Part of why I bring that up is at the quad board meeting. One, we had to make, they were expecting us to make like a presentation or something, and I'm not really sure like if like FinCom as a whole was like speaking on a topic, like what like position we're coming from as a group. But also one of the things that came up during the quad board meeting was how it's easy to hear about like one project from one person, it sounds good. Another person talks about another thing and that sounds good. And it's helpful to have all of the boards together in one room to discuss all of the different things in relation to each other. And I was thinking about the last year in FinCom, everybody came to us with like a different project and explained why it was already developed and was like a really good idea. And we voted in favor of everything. And I don't know if that was like an unusual year where everything was well thought out, or if it would be helpful to have a baseline that we're referring back to saying this sounds really great, but it puts us above a 10% ceiling on debt that we want to have as a town. And like lacking some, standard guideline that we've developed as a group to refer back to. I don't know how to like assess what people are telling me aside from like, oh, sounds like you thought it through very carefully already.
I think it's not unusual that we recommend everything. Part of, I like to think that part of it is that we offer feedback on an ongoing basis. So, I think the bleacher thing got pulled from this spring's town meeting because all of a sudden a bunch of people were expressing reservations about it. And so, that kind of feedback, I think, does have a real impact. But, some of what you're saying, yeah, I think we may approach it if somebody were, to propose the senior center, that you're going to say, wait a minute, that really puts us at like a 15% debt limit. And, the recommendation is more of 10%. But we don't, I don't know that we have those formal standards to evaluate a budget against. That, maybe it would make sense to develop.
Yeah, and to be clear, I wasn't advocating for you not to propose things. So I think it's totally fair for us to say, these are a bunch of things we think are happening around the town, and these are the things that, we think might be the most important. So like, we don't really have a formal system like the Capcom does to like rank things. But I think we can definitely use this as a forum to discuss things together. And, in the past, members of the committee have said, this is my opinion as one member, like, we're, presenting something as one member of the committee, I don't think is unfair, as long as it's presented in a way that makes it clear. Like, we can align together and also vote on things too, if that's helpful. But I think, like Peter said in the past, we haven't said, like, this is the FinCom's budget or something. Like, we've never done something like that where we're like, this is what we recommend to Greg for the budget to be, because that's sort of, I feel like at some level we're sort of watchdogs of the budget, but we're not really, in this town, we're not people who say this is what the budget should be. We can advocate and say, this is what we think would be best for the town going forward and make different scenarios. But, and I think that would help people, because I think, like Peter said, I have a personal opinion right now that people are kind of floundering because they don't know, they can't see, like, they're not exactly sure what is coming up and how to model some of these things and how to think about it as a whole picture, like you were saying, Nathan. So I think if we started making some examples of what that whole picture could be, that might actually help people and might help the discussion. I think right now, like, a lot of people are stalling because they sort of have one passionate project and they're not necessarily considering some of the other ones. So I think if we have a bunch of the pieces, maybe we could start to put the puzzle together and show people more of a fuller picture. And I think that would be really helpful as a finance committee for the townspeople. I feel like I maybe rambled a bunch right now, but
maybe we could have a future agenda item to discuss like how we can take some like concrete steps towards that.
yeah. And that's sort of what I've been like schlepping under this future planning bucket. But if you think there's a better English word for that, I'm totally open to it. Like, I don't know, scenario something, or I don't know. If you think of a good word, let me know, because I'm totally on board with you. I just don't know what to call it, which is why I just keep calling it future planning discussions.
Yeah, well, I mean, even something as like specific as like for the next meeting, come with a projection of what it would look like if we made a senior center, or like come up with some, I don't know, just like something like specific and concrete that we can have ready for like a next meeting.
Okay, so like future planning and like scenario discussions. Do you want to call them scenarios? Do you want to call them something different? I mean, let's talk about branding. Branding is important. Get people excited about it.
I mean, I love like tinkering around in like spreadsheets. But it would be helpful to have like a concrete, like, okay, by the next FinCom meeting, have like a specific thing ready and prepared to discuss. You know, do the research into, I don't know what,
So
something.
the model is already
Oh,
done
yeah.
prior to the meeting, and it's going to be brought to the table for discussion, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
I can tell you what I would love to see if you're excited to tinker. I would love to see, this is what the Capcom presented on the 4th. I would love to see like the senior center, the bleachers, and the DPW, like in future planning scenarios. Because I mean, I think the school is already on there, but I think these 3 other items are like really big items that we have coming up. Maybe like if we also want to model another, I don't know, $3.5 million or something for stormwater. That's not on here, but that could be like another big item that's important. So it could be like a mix of this and that other spreadsheet that I brought up that was the capitalized prioritized items. So that's what I started to do, and then I sort of ran out of time.
Nathan,
So,
you're
like, are
welcome
you
to be
asking
the spreadsheet guy. I'm gonna-
I think it would be good to sort of, and then look at them as we model against the benchmarks that we have, like when are we getting above our 10% debt limit?
Mm,
Or is there
Yeah.
sort of a benchmark?
Yeah.
And then where our reserves, I forget, the financial policy said 5 or 10% of the operating budget. I think it's 10%, so it should be about 5 million, and we're way under that. And so what would it take to meet the benchmarks that we might be sort of advocating for, right? These are like being a fiscally responsible town. But
Yeah, and I mean, I
I think
think
that
that
would be really good to say, okay, now
Yeah.
we're digging ourselves in. You can't just spend because our bond rating will go up, blah, 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 blah. Sort of have some triggers. I think that would be really useful, Nathan.
yeah. And random question on the bond issuance amount. I mean, rates are likely to drop, maybe twice this fall and a few times next year. Did they factor in? Is that just an average they take, or do they factor in potential, because 5%, even if it lowers to, 3.5 could make a giant difference in what we pay over time. Do you know if that adjusts in projections?
In past projections, whenever I've asked for like the thing that Peter showed, where he showed the Green Meadow School estimate, those numbers,
Yeah.
they always use a 5% interest rate. And I think that's because it's conservative and they want to be conservative.
Yeah.
So I'm
No,
not
that
sure
makes
if there's
sense.
like another number, but every single time I've asked for estimates of these, they've always used a 30-year 5% as sort of the base for those projections.
Okay.
Have you ever seen anything else different, Peter?
The cost of borrowing, the interest rate. I mean, I think they're doing it based on expectations. I think it used to be a little bit lower than 5%
Yeah.
when interest rates were lower. I think they're using 5% now because that's what they expect it to be. So it does vary based on interest rates, I guess is the short answer.
Okay. Was that helpful, Nathan, or did I just ramble and make it more confusing?
Uh,
A little bit of A, a little bit of B.
well, yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay. Okay. I'll try to consolidate and forward things around ideally before Sunday of our next meeting. So like you could actually look at it ahead of time. So if I can take the spreadsheet I'm working on, and you can probably work magic in your line item spreadsheet, and maybe it's a little more concise than what I'm thinking of in some of the scenario planning I'm going to try in my more general spreadsheet. But I mean, I think those are the big things that are coming up. It's like, and that might be on the STM, and it's going to be the DPW, the bleachers are like 2 big ticket items, and how we're going to think about those and advise people, are they a good idea at this time, or, what are the alternatives? I think the capital committee in some of their documents was talking about how we could like rent bleachers, however, at whatever cost we're renting them right now for like 30 or 40 years, instead of like paying for this $3.5 million for bleachers to build them. So I don't know. I think they've done some like scenario planning for like some of these capital items that we could probably learn from. It might be on their board docs or on their website. If not, I can reach out to Doug, who's the leader of the committee, if there's certain documents we have more questions about. But like that's only for capital stuff. So like if we want to say model something for the schools and model an operational override for the schools because their reserve funds are getting low, that could be another scenario. If we want to model giving them more money for the budget, what does that do to the general fund? And I think, spoiler alert, it's really going to increase our deficit. So those are the sort of the big ticket items I'm thinking about right now, and how I could try to model them. But maybe there's something that you're passionate about, like employee benefits or something, or, I think all the salary negotiations might have just happened, and you showed a bunch of those in the spreadsheet. So maybe that's not something we have to model right now. But, I think you had nice modeling of the trash stickers. I think that's another thing that people are passionate about too, and how those costs are going to change in the next couple of years. So I don't know if there's a way for us to think about that as a committee. But that could potentially be a pretty big cost because we offset that money through the general fund. Okay, so I updated the topic to say future planning and scenario discussions. But if you think of another word before then, let me know. Thank you for your suggestion. I appreciate it.
Cool.
All right. I do want to be mindful of the time. So
I have
So
a
I
big
think we're on
report
to
on
our-
the senior center committee, so I need to have some time for that.
all right. Yeah. So I wanted to jump to the routine agenda. So maybe we'll talk about that before we do the prior minute meeting approval. How's that? Would you like to go next, Linda?
Yeah, I think, well, we still have some gas left in the tank. So on June 18th, the senior center committee did a presentation to the select board. And they talked about their work. They have a really nice website with all resources, research that they've done. They have an FAQ section. And there's basically the strategy is a short-term and a long-term plan. And the short-term is for a lease. And the select board agreed to publish an RFI, a request for information. That will probably be released maybe as soon as July 8th, because it was dependent on Greg's vacation. And it'll be out for 30 days, but a draft of the RFI is in the select board's agenda on board docs from that June 18th meeting. So they're basically asking, it's no commitment from the town, but looking for 5,000 square feet of space for a term of 5 years at least. And so what they're trying to find out is who's interested, what the cost will be for leasing. Ballpark is it's going to be around 20 to anywhere, they're thinking around $20 to $30 a square foot. So that puts it like in 120 to 150,000 a year. They think if with the RFI, then they'll have a solid number that they'll bring before the special town meeting in the fall. And the advice that we're looking for, I'm looking for advice from the FinCom on, you know, the before they had a similar number and they said fund it through free cash, and that just didn't fly. It wasn't the best way to do it. So how, when they get this, they'll have a solid number from the RFIs, but then the next step would be to do an RFP to actually would then put the town on the hook for leasing space. And I just did the math, and you know, a 12 million, and then the long term is looking at building out a senior center at the cost of around the 12 million seems like a reasonable cost. The state recommends like 4 square feet per senior. We've got about 3,000 seniors, $1,000 a square foot, so it comes to 12 million. But the lease, you could spend that lease money for you divide it out, it's 80 years. So I don't know what the committee, after they do the RFP for lease, will they look at the lease build decision more carefully too? Because I think it's one option that will be on the, you know, should be under discussion. Yeah, there it is. So this is the draft. And so at the select board meeting, they authorized Greg to release it, to do an RFI. And he said he would add some, you know, some language, to have town council look at it. So, but it should be, I think the parameters of the square footage, the length of the lease, some of the other parameters, you know, that they were asking for about what would be in it. I'll say, if anyone knows of anyone who might be interested in leasing space, if you can pass the RFI along to see who might be interested in providing this to the town. But here's my question is, what advice could we give to them about structuring an article for a special town meeting? Do they have to go for an operational override to add something? Because this would probably come potentially within FY25. Or could we create a budget line item and then identify some funds that would cover the cost of the lease? And I just have some ideas. I don't know if any of those like reserve fund transfers that we'll see in a couple weeks could possibly be used from that. I don't know if like those 50,000 of golf course receipts that we're putting into that roof fund, that's, you know, we're never going to make the roof fund. And since the senior center is the tenant at the golf course, could we take those golf course receipts and fund the lease or partially fund the lease? I know the state provides some reimbursement per senior. I think it's at the rate of $14 a senior we got from the state. Could that, you know, go to it? I don't know if anyone's a representative to CPC, but to the extent the senior center is considered recreational, could they fund part of the lease?
What did you say the number was again? I didn't see it.
It's going to be in the range of $20 to $30 a square foot. So if you multiply 20 times 5,000, that comes to like 100,000. And if it was 30, it would be more like 150,000. So they'll know within, we should know by August, right? If the RFI is released July 8th or soon thereafter, by August, we should get responses back and know about what that lease will cost.
And Linda, that's annual?
That's annual, yep. And so it would commit the town for 5 years. So it has to be, you know, to execute a lease for 5 years would have, you know, would have to be something in the town budget, because the town would be committed for multiple years. And I know they had the idea of free cash. And I don't know if, like, right now, we know when we meet with Greg on the FY25 budget, to even have, it's early in the year, but do we have some sense of where that free cash might be coming from? And we could move, you know, we had a mild winter. Can we move money from, I know we put the snow and ice at the end, but is there any place where we can anticipate moving money from to fund it in FY25? I know we have 180,000 in our reserve budget. Is there any other reserves that when they craft an article for the fall town meeting that would, you know, be reasonable? And I don't know if you've been to the golf course, but that building is just in terrible, terrible condition. I mean, it's just, you know, there's no question they should get out of there very, very soon. So that's what I was looking for, some ideas to bring back to the senior center committee as they're working on crafting an article after the RFI, they get the good information where they would fund this lease from.
I think understanding the COA budget trends would be helpful for me, because I don't know if I've seen that pulled out as a line item before, and I'm used to looking at the high level items.
Yeah.
Because if it's $166,000 right now, understanding what that's usually used for.
Yeah, it's used for, it's used, I'll see if I could get some more detail. Or Nathan, do you know, it's mostly salaries and programs, because they have 2 staff.
Yeah,
because someone might look at that and say, that's more than 150. Why don't you just use that to pay for it? And I know that it pays for other stuff.
Well, it pays for, they have the director and a you know, an administrative person. So it's mostly the staff, also some of the programs that they run.
Yeah, that's so their salary is $130,000. Their utilities are about $7,000. The main thing is after the salaries is $25,000 for their programming, and then dues and membership and other things add up to that 6,000. Office supplies.
Mostly salaries. Yeah. So I don't think you would, I'm not sure about utilities. We could look to that to see if in a lease, if we would save on the utilities when they went into a lease, or if you're going to be responsible for the utilities in a lease.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just off the top of my head, negotiating a lease for longer than 5 years, you'll get a better rate, but then you'll be locked in for a longer time.
Yeah, I think that, did the RFI say 5 years with a 5 to 7, or I forget.
Yeah, it said 5 with
some with options for renewing. Yeah, I know we looked at Acton, and Acton is, most of the senior centers are not leased, but Acton does have a long-term lease, and they're very happy. They got a very good, they got a very good deal. They locked in a 10-year rate, and they had considered building, and they just decided that the lease at the time was more cost effective.
Because I've done this in the past where I've calculated, so I'm for lab space, like laboratory space.
Yeah.
Basically in the cycle of a biotech company, you're lucky if you're a company for like 3 to 5 years, but everyone negotiates like 25-year leases, because breaking the lease is cheaper in the long run, which is, I don't know how that works out, but the cost you would have in the clause to break the lease was actually cheaper. So you negotiate the upfront and you're there for like 10 years. And then if you decide you need to move and get a bigger space, you either sublet it or you just break the lease and pay whatever the fee is.
Yeah. But does anyone have ideas about how they could craft an article or where they're going to find the money from? I mean, go for an override. I mean, it's a small amount of money for an override.
I would say I mean, Greg's talking about potentially bundling a couple $1 million for capital stuff, like the gas tank failure at the Winter Street garage is like $500,000. He was potentially talking about putting in the golf station improvement, the golf situation, like the roof and the building envelope there. So if it's something that can be bundled with something else,
is that mostly debt? Is that mostly debt, Jillian, was he thinking of, or because this would be operational?
Yes.
Right. That's a debt thing, not an operational override.
Yeah.
Oh, right. It's operational. That's a good point.
This is operation. Yeah. I think a lease, I don't know that you could borrow for a lease. I don't know. It doesn't sound right, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, I don't think so. That's a good question. I will put that on the list to ask Greg. Off the top of my head, I do not have any golden goose eggs to suggest.
Yeah, it seems like sometime in the year they must know where the free cash is coming from. We could move it into a lease line item. I don't,
Yeah, they're not going to know that in October.
They won't know until it's
they
certified.
won't know that by October.
Nope. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for a lease payment for 5 years. Yeah, I think the only choices are you do an override or you cut somebody else's budget.
Yeah.
I would not support using the reserve fund. We can't use free cash. Yeah, I mean, trying to fit in 100,000 or 150,000 at fall town meeting is going to be quite difficult. Even trying to fit it into an FY26 budget is, very tricky also.
All right. Are there any other topics on that you want to bring up, Linda?
Yeah. Any other options? Does anyone know about CPC? Do you think it's considered recreational at all? Somebody?
I don't know if this is a lease. That would be a question to bring to them. I don't know if their costs cover leases.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they can't pay for operational stuff.
Not operational. Yeah. Okay.
Because otherwise we would have tried to shift the recreation department into CPC.
Okay. They only buy stuff. Okay. All right.
I mean, certainly worth asking them, but I was thinking about it just now, and it's like, I mean, we would have if we could have, we would have tried to shift operational budget onto them.
Yeah, yeah,
Already.
okay. All right, well, thank
right.
you. I said I'd bring it up here. Override or cut budget. And I don't know, can you do any fee for service? I mean, I don't know if seniors, if, you know, how that would fly, like.
I think the
selling
seniors are gonna
membership-
support $150,000 fee for service. That seems like it'd be a big burden to them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because I think based on the presentation there was a cost breakdown per senior or something.
yeah. All right, well, thank you. This is not the last you'll hear of it, I'm sure.
Yep. All right. Are there any other updates?
Wait, one word, Linda, just, I mean, as feedback to that committee, if you're so inclined. I think their frequently asked questions, doesn't address regionalization enough.
Okay, Yep.
I'm not compelled by their answer. And part of it is the Acton one that they cite positively elsewhere is, 50 feet over the Maynard border.
yeah. That was
Um,
actually at the presentation to the select board. We had questions about other things that the committee had considered, and one was like using other town resources like the library, the Boys and Girls Club for programs. Another was regionalization. There was a third option that they wanted to see. I guess other town buildings, other things we'd considered besides leasing. So we do have to make the committee does have to make a strong case of all the other options that they considered.
yeah, and I'm sure part of where the select board is coming from is just really going to be hard to shoehorn in another $100,000.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just priorities, right? It's just, lots of good projects.
Sorry, Jillian. I was just looking at their frequently asked questions, so.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
I did have a Green Meadow Building committee meeting tonight, and at 6:30 they were still going, and I popped off just to get myself prepared for this meeting. But it was mostly about design. They're still in the design phase. So permitting comes in August 2024. There's some bids due just, I think, next week for some of the contracting things. They voted to approve the solar design as part of a carport type of thing. And that was about it. There wasn't anything giant that seemed to change or be voted on.
Thank you for sharing. All right. Any other updates from any other members on those different topics? No? All right. I did share with you the memos that came around from the DPW about the current water capacity restrictions. Those are also posted on board docs. So that's something to consider going forward, is that we could potentially be limited in our new growth opportunities because we might not be able to supply water to large developments. So that's something to consider. I know that in the past there was a committee that looked at getting water from one of the nearby ponds, because we have easements and other things to be able to do that, but we'd have to, it would be quite an endeavor, and it would need to be supplemented by state and federal funds because it'd be really expensive. was it Whitehead's Pond? So on the Maynard website, there's actually that report that they made several years ago at this point. It might even be 10 years ago. But yeah, that's, I'm sure we are all aware of the restrictions that we have for growth. That was my only update on other topics. All right. And then if that's that, I got 2 other meeting minutes that we can vote on. So we got the meeting from May 20th.
And I recognize that after seeing the most recent one, my reserve fund transfers are off, so we'll have to update that.
I updated it.
Oh, you're so good. All right. Thank you.
So it's all good. So this includes our public hearing. So this went over the different articles and it also had the articles that we did not yet vote on. So those are nicely captured here. And then there was a motion to close the public hearing. And then we talked more about the cemetery trust fund. So 13 and 14, those articles that we still had some questions on, and we voted on those after as well. And then we talked a little bit about budget subcommittee meeting and some other meetings. And then Khadijah was not renewing her term. So, and then I updated the reserve funds at the bottom. So that should be the correct, most up-to-date numbers that I am aware of.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking notes.
Yeah.
I move to accept these minutes.
I will
All right,
second
so
to
Nathan-
approve the May 20th minutes.
Okay, so Nathan moves, Katie seconds. Any other further discussion on the meeting minutes of May 20th? Nope. All right, so I will take a roll call vote. Linda,
Yes,
Katie,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
All right, I am also a yes. So these minutes have been approved. Great. And then we have one other meeting minute notes from June 3rd. All right. So this is the meeting from June 3rd. So this is where we have the Capital Planning Committee also join us and talk about the scope of their planning and the projects that they look for. We also talked about the inventory of the different vehicles, and we talked about ClearGov. And then it's definitely the consensus that it was a valuable conversation. So the annual town meeting, we had a debrief there, and then we talked about routine agenda, and we did some updates. So we talked about the upcoming multi-board meeting that we already voted on the minutes. And then we did some future planning. So talking about our next meetings coming up and the openings, which has currently been filled.
Can you scroll back up to
Yeah.
the section about the Capcom presentation? Oh,
Certainly.
okay. In the third paragraph, funding for capital projects, the debt service for the town is not about 8% to 10% of the total budget. Should that be is now about?
I think that's correct, Nathan. Thank you.
Okay.
And then in the second to last paragraph there, the software tool, it says clear.gov, but I think it's clear.gov and it's .com.
Yep.
Cool.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes from June 3rd.
as amended.
As amended.
Perfect. So Katie has made a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, and Nathan seconds. All right, so I will stop sharing. I will now take a roll call vote. Linda,
Yes,
Katie,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
I am also a yes. So these are approved as amended. So I will save that. Perfect. Awesome. So those are all the minutes that I had for our approval tonight. Yep. So our next meeting will be on the 8th, and Dick will open that meeting. And that is all of the items I have for tonight, unless anyone has any pressing topics and or business.
Jill, you're
right.
gonna follow up with Kevin. Is that what you decided?
Yep, I'm going to send Kevin an email to see if he'd still like to serve on the committee. Because he's been no call, no show for a couple meetings here, so which makes me a little nervous. So I hope everything is okay for him and his family.
And then Jillian, can I don't know how the open meeting thing, but can I email you maybe potential dates that we could hop on a Zoom and maybe go over ways that I could learn to post on Board Docs or some of the other tasks?
Yeah, I think that it's fair because we're not a quorum. And
Okay.
you're asking me specific things about how to post.
Okay. I will do that.
Yeah, just to note there, the quorum is the key thing. That, I mean, any two of us or even three of us can get together and talk in as much detail as we want to. It's whether we have a quorum or not that becomes an issue for open meeting.
Okay.
That's why we can't send an email to the entire committee talking about stuff, or, you know, in deliberations, but you can definitely talk to people one-on-one, you know, in as much detail as you want, so.
Okay, I wasn't sure how that works, so that's good to know. Thank you.
So just something I never quite understood. How is it that the that like Jillian can send an email out to all of us to disseminate like materials for a meeting? Is it because that's duplicated on Board Docs or?
Because it would be counted as informational and not deliberative. So you
one
can't,
of us.
you can't be part of, in the process of making a decision or having deliberations via email. So, you know, we can't send an email saying to the whole committee saying, you know, I think there should be a capital line for $100,000. We can send an email saying, here's the presentation the capital committee gave. You know, I can send out the spreadsheet, the budget spreadsheet I do to everybody. I can't send it out with a whole commentary of which line items I think are good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
It is my understanding anyway.
And if someone replied all to the email that I send out, that could potentially be counted as deliberation. So that's why if you have a question, just email me directly, like one-on-one. Don't like email all, because then that could potentially violate open meeting law. Which, you know, it's also another reason why I didn't send an email after I went to the select board meeting. Was like, I went to this meeting, they told us we have to give a presentation, and that's not what I thought was going to happen, because that's not necessarily informational. It's more,
Your feelings.
I guess it's deliberative. It'd be a little more gripey, I guess, but yeah. Because then I couldn't poll you all for your opinions on a presentation, because then that would be violating open meeting laws.
Right.
So, so that's honestly why I didn't send it out, because I didn't want anyone to reply at all, like, I think this is what the presentation should be or something. So that's why I just didn't send anything. So hopefully they'll post the meeting more than 48 hours ahead of time so that we know that what the agenda is and if they expect a presentation. Because that was a surprise for me.
Yeah.
So I could have made something, but then it would have been my presentation. So I didn't feel like that was fair either. But anyway, I digress. All right, if there's no additional topics, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. What do you all think?
I will make a motion to adjourn at 9:41 p.m.
I'll second.
All right, and Linda seconds. All right, roll call vote. Linda,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
I am also a yes, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Much appreciated.